I'm Charles Edward McGee, Colonel, United States Air Force, retired, but because I enjoyed aviation, spent 30 years in the service and actively flew 27 of them. Well, that's a good question because folks ask me how I got into aviation. I said I was avoiding the draft. I was in ROTC at the University of Illinois and learned to handle a rifle. But because I was in school, my draft board wasn't pulling my number. Had they pulled my number, I'm sure I would have been carrying a rifle in the mud. And when I had that first ride, the first time I'd been in or around an airplane in a PT-17 down in Tuskegee, Alabama, I knew I'd made the right decision because I fell in love with flying. To be able to get in there and loop roll and spin, come back and put your feet on the ground, I was hooked. We were trained for what we had to do, so it was a matter of getting in an airplane with more horsepower, more equipment, more instruments, and of course with the weapons, guns in this case, depending on what our mission was. But our training prepared us for it, so it wasn't something I was scared of. In fact, I've been asked, "Were you scared?" And I said, "No, if you're scared, you're in the wrong business." The training was excellent, and that was good. They didn't change the training standards, even though the Army didn't want us and didn't believe we were going to perform effectively in this technical area of aviation. Because of good training and good leadership, we were able, I'll put it this way, to dispel the biases, the generalizations, and in some cases racist ideas that because of our happenstance of birth, our color of skin, we could not do anything in a technical area. In other words, we didn't have the brain power, the will, fortitude. All of these things were part of a 1925 War College study that said that if America got involved in another war, we could do service things, dig ditches, cook food, drive trucks, but perform in a technical area, impossible. They claim they've studied the issue and that there shouldn't be an attempt in more in technical areas because we wouldn't be qualified or be successful. We dispelled that once given the opportunity. Well, we really didn't have an opportunity to do that because segregation went overseas too. We were trained separately, we went overseas separately, and although the first squadron going into North Africa, Sicily, and then into Italy was attached to white groups, they were not at even the same base. So segregation went overseas, and that was one of the things when they authorized the first squadron and those that followed. In the fine print it said, and all of the necessary support. So besides the pilots and mechanics for the plane, we had to have medical, communication, supply, administration, all these other skills. So when you put that picture together, the program produced over 900 pilots. But when you look at all the necessary support through the years that the program was active, there's probably 14,000 people involved. So as I say, coming together and being successful brought about a change for our country, although the Army never changed the policy throughout the war. As I look back, and I don't think we went into training and performance that we were overcoming racism. But for my own self, I look at it of how I was brought up, and number one, treat other people like you want to be treated, and there was an old saying back when I was a youngster that sticks and stones will break my bones, but words won't hurt any. So although there were circumstances where names were called and so on, I'd let those things, if you will, roll off the side. And then a few years later, as a teen, fortunately had experience with Boy Scout program. And I'd say even today, if everybody lived by the Scout Oath and the 12 Scout laws, we'd have a different country. But that, on my honor, I will be respectful, I'll help others, and keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight, and then to live trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, reverent. When you put that together, I just say, what else would you ask for? It certainly struck me and looking back, I can just say it gave me a good life. It'd be that way. And then even after that, in my college training, I joined a fraternity. But one of the precepts is to be first of all, you first must overcome. And so things that, fighting never solved the problem. Just everybody went away, somebody bruised, somebody hurt, and still mad. They never shook hands and walked away as friends out of that. So it's these types of things, so in my background, that I feel helped me be successful. And I pass that on to the young folks even today. Number one, when we talked about aviation, because I liked it, find what you like to do. And don't let somebody tell you can't do something. It's a lot in the mind and your makeup and how you perceive. Well, the country had come out of 10 years of depression. The war built up, and the entry for some was a change that all of the country was involved in. Everybody was supportive. Didn't change racism, but yet the job opportunities that became available, the willingness to serve and support the effort, it was a mindset of the whole country where racism, if you will, although it still existed, didn't predominate in a way that prevented that type of service. And it was something that everyone wanted to be a part of and wanted our country to be successful. And that goes beyond race or color or happenstance of birth. That's an interesting question because to me, it brings about an understanding of war. And as I mentioned, World War II, our country declared war and provided what it took to win the war. As I look back and I tell folks now, Korea, Vietnam, and much what we've been doing is using military power for political purposes. We didn't declare war against them. We decided to participate. But politics is a compromise. So folks talk about winning. There's no win when it's a compromise. And to me, that's what's happened in Korea, Vietnam. Still a divided Korea. Vietnam, the outcome, not very good. What's going on? And this is difficult. And the sad thing about it is a lot of American lives are lost, but we didn't win. And that's, a lot of folks don't understand that, of how we've used our military power. And yet, I guess in one way you look at it, it's important that we have a strong military, because who knows what would take place if we didn't, and where it's been used. But it's how it's been used, to me, is still a problem. Being active in the military, I really didn't get much involved in the civil rights program and fighting, but I realized a lot, because as we traveled around the country to going from one assignment to a new base and location, but to pull up to a motel and the signs flashing, but once you walk in, oh, we don't have anything for you, you can't, or having to pass many eateries open, but realizing they're not even served, to find one that you may know by name, or hope that they won't turn you away. It had its difficulties from that point of view, and how to handle the family as we traveled around, but we didn't let that be the deciding factor on how we acted or how we lived. And I've mentioned in one of the other questions the things that I felt and tried to pass on to my family, of how to react and not let those circumstances be, if you will, be our excuse for not achieving or doing well and serving well on the assignments that I was given. The war ended in 1945. 1947, our Air Force became a separate service, separated from the ground forces. And in their studies and preparation, determined that they need to use people based on training and experience and where needed, not the color of their skin, if you will. And they're not getting enough money to keep the assigned bases at that time, Tuskegee, Lockburn Air Base south of Columbus, Ohio, keep them open but separate, not being able to meet their military requirements. And we need to integrate. They were backed by a very courageous president. 10 months later, President Harry Truman issued an executive order, 9981, mandating all of the services need to integrate. Well, change takes time. The Air Force finally, in 1st of July 1949, closed the segregated base, and if you will, we were scattered around the world. Didn't change everything, because my first integrated assignment was Smoky Hill Air Base, Salina, Kansas. I got along fine on base in my work that I was assigned, but I never got my family to Salina, Kansas, because a black couldn't buy or rent a home in those days in that area. They began closing bases that were built up to support the wars. Smoky Hill there at Salina was one of them. The unit was moving to the base in the south. I was shipped out to Riverside, California. Again, got along fine on base with my work, but even Riverside, California at that time frame wasn't a friendly place for blacks. And I know one time with a couple other officers, as we were on our way home, decided to stop and have a beer. I couldn't join them. Housing wasn't immediately available, but fortunately far away from the base, it turned out happened to be a farmer had 2 homes on his property, and he rented one of them. We were able to get by. So I would say things change very slowly here at home. We got good assignments and great opportunities. To me, as I look back at my record, for years, overseas, fine. Back here at home, still, these problems hadn't gone away. But again, we didn't let that deter performance and so on. So slowly things began to change. And as I say, although being on active duty, I was not directly involved in the civil rights program, but the sit-ins for improved lunch places to bring about a change were all a part of that in the 60s and so on. So it was a slow progress, but things began to change. Well, the assignment, as I say, helped bring about a change in a lot of places. In those early days, assignment in the South, I'm sure it was difficult with a family with children because some of the base in the South, there were no schools on base. If you had to go off into the community, then the problems that existed there were still had to be overcome in some way or other. I can remember even coming back home from Korea, and I was in command and staff school. We found a home nearby, but even on base, went into the barber shop and got a haircut. Barber started to cut my hair, and then he said, "Are you black?" "Yes." He wouldn't finish cutting my hair. I had to get the base commander to act, and finally said, well, they found a black barber in Montgomery and had him set up a room where he could come out to the base, and we that were assigned there could get our hair cut. So it's amazing how things like that came about slowly. In many areas it took time before they realized that, well, in my mind, I don't know whether they said it this way, that their attitude and action wasn't that important. More important was the job assignments, the performance, why were the bases there, all of these other things took over. So slowly, the effort to get more people to realize that it's your character. I think that's what Martin Luther King said, it's your character that's important, not your happenstance of birth, and help bring about a change across the country. And now you can travel in the South and places, and doesn't mean that there aren't those folks that don't like integration, but at least they don't fight it. It is a way of putting it. I would say the advice I give is for anybody, for all, not just one. I think we need to realize that we're all Americans. We all love America, hopefully. Well, my advice to young folks today, I give it in 4 P's. Perceive, prepare, perform, persevere. What do I mean by perceive? Oh, dream your dreams. But I like to add to that, as you do, hopefully you find something you like, because you don't want to have to go to work every day disliking what you have to do. But that brings up prepare. Get a good education, learn to read, write, and speak well, and develop the talents that you discovered earlier. And as I say, hopefully among those things that you will enjoy doing. And perform. Let excellence be, always doing your best, but let excellence be your goal in everything that you do, not just some things. Perform. And finally, persevere. We could have, because they called us names, and someone gone off in the corner and not served. What would that have accomplished? Don't let circumstances be your excuse for not achieving. That's what I pass on when I get a chance to talk to young folks today, and I hope that's good for everybody. But if those 4 P's are followed, you would hope that it would mean a good life for the individual. And as I tell young folks, what's good for you is good for your family, for the community, and for our country. Well, our early training in the fighter that was available was the P-40 Warhawk, a good airplane for low altitude work. And when we went into the escort work, began the escort work, though, we dropped both the P-39 and the P-40 and flew the P-47 Thunderbolt. Big radial engine, lots of more horsepower, but again, limited because of the nature of the big radial engine, altitude capability, and performance. Had extra pair of guns, which was good, very roomy cockpit, but to fight the German Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf aircraft, we needed an aircraft that had the altitude, speeds, and range capability to meet their performance. That was the P-51 Mustang, but I always say qualified with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The early Allison engine didn't have the supercharging and quite as well as the Rolls-Royce. But with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, we now had aircraft good to 35,000 feet with a range of up to 1,000 miles. And so speed, range, performance, it was the #1 aircraft of the day and the one that helped us win the war. Oh, the first flight in the P-51, as I say, to be able to particularly escort our B-17s, who they flew even higher without changing their mission and performance than the B-24s. P-51 gave us the aircraft to be able to fly above them and around them in a way that we couldn't even in the, as I say, P-47, which had, to me, the altitude limit, although you could get individual aircraft up to 30,000 feet. When you have a full formation, it wasn't that capable because in most of the missions, each squadron put up 16 aircraft and you're flying together. The P-51 gave us, say, the altitude and performance capability to 35,000 feet. And that was key for excellent performance, particularly escorting the B-17s. Hard to compare, and you have to be careful because we moved from the piston engine age into the jet age, and technology has made a big change in performance. The P-51, for its day and time, was one of the top aircraft in the fighter element. Later replaced by jets, but my last jet flying was in the F-4 fighter. I later, after retirement, still got a chance to get an F-16 flight. And somebody said, how do you compare? I said, you don't. Technology has provided capability and performance that denies that type of comparing. So we have to be careful when somebody asks that kind of question. But certainly of the early piston engine aircraft, where you're talking P-39, P-40, P-47, P-51 was top performance. But technology made that possible. Today in the jet age, the first jet I flew, the F-80, you could, even at 100% power, you could hold it on the ground with your brakes. Look what's come since then. You pop the afterburner on the F-4, you're not going to hold it on the ground with your brakes. The F-22 has performed, and the enemy has never seen them or known they were in the air. Technology. And my concern would be that many of our schools aren't keeping our youngsters informed of where technology is taking us. So a youngster that's interested, we still need a space plane to go from New York to Tokyo, 2.5 hours, but the airframe materials, the fuels and so on that can stand the heat exchange of going out into the upper atmosphere and back to Earth still needs some resolution to make that possible. Many advancements in technology, and our youngsters hopefully will be kept from, because some of them, somebody's going to come along with the knowledge to even go beyond that. We'll need it if we're going to make it to Mars someday. And that's something I tell youngsters. I said, well, you all know we're planning to go to Mars. Yes, they've all heard about it. But I say, guess who's going to make the trip? Planners, when they get it all resolved, are probably going to be too old. It's going to be one of you sitting here that's going to be able to make that trip. So how are you preparing for it? But I think that's a big challenge to our school systems, that the advancement need and we're talking technology, but it applies to medicine and many other areas that we don't have all the smarts yet to deal with all of the issues that come up. But these are the things that our youngsters will be facing in their future, and what it means not only for them individually, but what it means for the country. All very important. My only answer to that question is, hopefully someday we end wars. There'll be no more war. But we have them. And I think I may have mentioned earlier, but in answering that question, World War II, we declared war. We built up industry to support the effort and provide what it needed to win the war. Korea, we fired a general that wanted to win the war. But no, politics says you cannot cross the Yalu River. Well, that allowed the Chinese to come in the war, and we ended up with a divided Korea. There were also restrictions in Vietnam that kept us from winning the war. So we ended war diplomatically, I guess is one way of putting it, but we didn't win. So folks would say, we won this, we won Korea. No, you have to look at where we are now and what's happened since to fully understand that. So it's not an easy or a picture that you can paint a rosy future on because of the way we operate. So it's, I guess, be a long time in fully answering that question. That's probably the best way of putting it, but one we have to consider. When this program started, we weren't called Tuskegee Airmen. The very first, now called Tuskegee Airmen, were mechanics trained at Chinook Field in Rantoul, Illinois, because the Army policy was we can't use a black pilot because we don't have any black mechanics. Um, Mechanics were trained at Chanute Field and sent south. Well, certainly, I would say they should be congratulated because the youngsters coming into a classroom all don't come from the same background. They don't come from the same home environment. They don't come with the same will to get an education. So they have a heavy burden in my mind to overcome and should be congratulated to teach, but also to realize that the challenge of them within whatever system they are to be able to motivate every youngster that's sent to their classroom. I don't know what bigger challenge there is in any field of work than that which teachers have. And certainly not only giving them thanks for wanting to be a teacher, but preparing to be, and let them know that they have our support, hopefully for a very successful career, and that means a meaningful outcome of the youngsters that enter their classroom.